Hello everyone, welcome to another episode with Broke Girls Art School. In today's episode, we are going to be taking some epoxy resin and alcohol ink in order to make some coasters that look like this. And per usual, I will tag all the supplies that I'm using in the description box down below. And yeah, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see some future content from me. And let's get started. Alrighty, so first things first, I'm going to show you guys all the supplies that I'm using. For this project, I'm going to be using Amazing Clear Cast, which you can find at Hobby Lobby and Michael's. You're going to want some gloves, paper towels, and toothpicks nearby so you can fish out any debris. You're going to want some red solo cups or plastic cups of your choice and some tongue depressors. I'm going to be using gold leaf for these. So I just buy sheets of gold leaf and then kind of break it up into little pieces. And these are the silicone molds that I'm going to be using for the coasters. You're going to want a torch or a heat gun, something to pop the bubbles in the epoxy. Next, I usually like to use a lot of white and gold pigment whenever I'm doing alcohol ink. So I put those into some smaller dripper bottles, and then I also have one bottle filled with just plain alcohol, and that's good to like disperse the pigment. And these are the different brands of alcohol ink that I'm using. The smaller bottle was just like a big pack that I got with like 25 colors. I really like the Pinata brand. It's super pigmented. And this other brand I got from Michael's. Like I said, I'll tag everything in the description box for you guys so you can see all the stuff that I'm using. And here is a close-up of all the different inks that I'm going to be using in one set for the coasters. And I'm going to do two different color sets. 3 of them are going to be like pinks and oranges, and the other ones are going to be blues and greens. You guys are definitely going to want to make sure to wear a mask and some goggles for this, as the fumes from epoxy resin are not safe to breathe in, and you don't want it in your eyes either. So first I'm taking my side A of the epoxy, and I labeled my cups A and B, and as you can see here, I put a little mark at the bottom of the cups to make sure I filled them up evenly. So I'm just going to fill it up to that line with both part A and part B. And another helpful trick for you guys is before you pour your epoxy to put them in like a bowl with some hot water, so it'll kind of warm the bottle and it'll make it easier for those bubbles to float to the top if the epoxy is already warm. So here we are adding our epoxy, and then I'm pouring mine into a 3rd cup, so that way if I want to use more epoxy in the future, I can just pour my A into the A cup and then the B into the B cup. And you're going to want to make sure that you scrape out all the epoxy from the sides of the cup, just so you get the most even pour that you can. You can also weigh it if you're feeling super fancy and want to be extra precise, but I just use lines to mark it. And here is how you're going to want to stir your epoxy. You want to go nice and slow. Make sure that you're constantly like scraping around the edges, and also like wiping off the little wood stick, so just in case any of it sticks to the side. So here we are sped up, but mix our epoxy for approximately 5 minutes. I'd say 3 to 5 minutes and you should be good. And then I'm going to be filling up all of my molds with, you know, as close to the same amount as I can get. And unfortunately, I did end up running out of epoxy, and I didn't have enough to fill this last mold all the way. So I thought I would show you guys a little example on what happens when you mix your epoxy too fast, because it creates lots of bubbles. So here I just added a little bit more epoxy so I can top off that mold, and as you can see, I wasn't really taking my time mixing. Just went at it super quick and there was a lot of bubbles. So here I'm just taking my toothpick and going around the edges of the molds to get out any bubbles that might have gotten stuck in there. And then now we're pouring in that crappy bubbly epoxy. So you can see the difference already. It's just way more foggy, not clear at all. And even when I take my torch to it, it doesn't get like all of those bubbles out. A heat gun in this situation will probably help out a bit more, just because it heats up the resin that much more and it's not so much on the surface. But yeah, so the next step that I'm going to be doing is taking my gold leaf. And for coasters, I like to just put the gold leaf in the middle and then the alcohol ink like around the edges. I think it just makes for a cool effect. So we're adding our gold leaf to all of the molds, and then I'm going to take my toothpick and just kind of like shove that gold leaf in a little bit so it's not just on the surface. Make sure it's all nice and submerged. All right, and now we're going to start with our alcohol ink. So I'm just going in and doing, I think it was 5 drips there, kind of evenly around the edges. I mean, if you want to get crazy with it and do it in more like random patterns, you can, but I like coasters to look a bit neater and more uniform, and it's easier to control what the alcohol ink does when you have like the same drip patterns for all of your different pieces. And another thing that I like to do pretty much every time I use alcohol ink is I layer the pigment with just white alcohol ink, because I feel like it helps push those colors through to the surface. And here you can see the inks kind of reacting with each other. It looks super cool close up. But now I'm just kind of doing that same thing for the other 2 coasters. This is sped up a little bit, but you guys get the idea. Yeah, I need to get a better white dropper because it's kind of hard to control how it comes out sometimes. But now we're back to our first coaster, and I'm just going to be layering more and more inks. With thicker things like this, like these coasters, you can get away with using quite a bit of ink, but you don't want to use too much ink if you're making like little necklaces for like pendants or something like that, because it doesn't have as much space for the ink to flow through, and sometimes the white will just sink all the way to the bottom and you won't really be able to see anything. And here we're just layering, and now I'm adding some gold in. The gold looks super cool when you drop it in, so I wanted to show you guys a little up close of that. It's so sparkly and nice. And then here's what happens when you drip just regular alcohol in the center. You can see that ink kind of pushing away from the alcohol. And that's just pure, I think it was like 70% alcohol. But if you have like too much crowding with your ink, then you can just drip the plain alcohol where you don't want the ink to be, and it'll kind of push it back out to the edges. So here we're just adding more and more layers. It's looking super cool. And I usually like to wait a little bit to add the gold. I'll do that like more towards the end of my drops because I don't want it to be like at the forefront of the piece so much. And gold also can have a tendency to kind of sink to the bottom of it, which you don't want. So here's a little fast forward time lapse of some reactions happening. And then I did the same thing with these 2 coasters. Instead I used like blues and purples and some green in there, but exact same technique, just layering drops. But to be completely honest, I didn't care about these coasters as much because I knew one of them was going to be bubbly and shitty, so it's whatever. But they still turned out cool. Here's some more gold action. Looks so sweet. Yeah, the cool thing about doing little epoxy resin projects like this is the back of it looks just as cool as the front sometimes. All right, so now I'm going to show you guys again what happens when you drip just plain alcohol in. It can really help spread the ink out and start some new reactions, and helps the ink blend a little bit, I think. So this part was pretty stagnant before I dropped it in, and then it just goes and pushes away all that ink to kind of free up space. All right, and it is about 12 hours later when I woke up the next morning that I'm demolding these. It's probably best to wait like a full day, but I'm impatient and I like to do it right when I wake up. It's like a fun little surprise. Yeah, that one, it was unfortunate. I ripped my mold when I went to take it out, but it's whatever. So there's the back, and this is what the front of the first pinkish one looks like. I'm super happy with these. It reminds me of like cotton candy. And this is the second pink coaster. And it's cool. When you get up close to some of those, they almost look like little brains. Cotton candy brains. That's what I'll name my coasters. And then here is the third one. This one didn't turn out quite as cool. I don't really like how that white kind of blobbed at the bottom, but you know, they can't all be perfect. It's still cool though. All right guys, so I just wanted to show you the difference between epoxies. This one was with the first batch, and then this one I ran out, and I figured I'd show you guys how much of a difference it makes when you create a lot of bubbles by mixing super fast. So you can see in here, there we go, lots and lots of bubbles in there. I mean, it still looks cool from a distance, but when you get up close, it's pretty foggy. And then this one is the epoxy that I took my time with, you know, made sure it was heated up before and everything, and it's much more clear. So just wanted to show you guys a little example of why you should take your time and be really precise when it comes to working with epoxy resin. Alright guys, and next I'm going to be painting the back of the coasters. I like to put these coasters on like a cork bottom, and I don't really like the look of just the cork showing through because I feel like it kind of muddies the cool designs that we got. So I thought it would be nice to just do a solid black on the background. And I'm going to be doing a couple coats of this on all the backs of these to make sure it's nice and solid. And then on the blue coasters, I'm going to be doing a white background for them. So same thing, just a couple coats of the white. These are both just cheap acrylic paints that I had lying around, nothing fancy. I mean, you're not going to really see it besides seeing through the coaster, so it doesn't need to be perfect, but you do want to wipe around the edges, make sure it looks nice and clean. All right, and then these are the cork bottoms that I have. I think I got these from like Hobby Lobby, but I'm sure I can find them on Amazon, so I'll tag a link for you guys. So again, we're just doing a couple coats of black, couple coats of white, and they're not quite the perfect size for the coasters, so I will have to trim them down in a second, which I will show you guys. But real quick, here is what the coasters look like with the black background. All right, so now that my paint is dry, I'm gonna line these up and then just grab a regular razor blade, and I put down like a silicone mat that I have as like a barrier so I wasn't like cutting my table. But I'm just kind of going around the edge with the razor blade, and I'm not cutting all the way through the cork. As long as you cut like halfway through, you can kind of peel it off like this. It's not the neatest thing, but it looks better, I think, than if it was a little bit oversized. I feel like another good way to do that would be just to like sand it as well. That could possibly work, but the razor blade works just fine. And once I had them down to the size that I want, I'm just gonna take my acrylic paint again and go around the edges. I feel like it just makes it look a little bit neater and more uniform. Doing the same thing with the pink coasters, and then throwing the black around the edges. And then one step that I did forget this time around, usually I'll like sand the back of the coasters a little bit because sometimes the edges aren't like perfectly flat. So if you just sand down the backs a little bit, that usually takes care of it. But I put enough glue on the back of the coasters so it like wouldn't make a big difference. So they still turned out fine. So now I'm just taking my Gorilla Glue and kind of doing a little swirly swirl on the back of the cork and the back of the epoxy. I didn't go too crazy with the glue because I didn't want it to be like, you know, coming out of the sides whenever I smushed it down. But yeah, so now we're just going to glue the backs of the rest of these. And I am going to be grabbing like a heavier piece of wood to kind of like put some weight on these while they dry for a few hours. And then I put a couple heavy things that I could find on top of it. There's that piece of wood, and then I just threw a couple random things on top, and here is the finished product. I am absolutely obsessed with how these pink ones came out. I think they're so cool. And I really like the black background because I feel like it made the stuff in the foreground like pop out quite a lot more. So here's the first one, here's the second. And I love how you never really know what you're going to get with these. Like, the designs and patterns can be so random, but they're usually always really cool. Here's a little still shot, and then these are how the blue ones turned out. Well, more purpley blue, whatever. But I also do like these ones with the white background too. I don't think you can really go wrong, but I do think it's necessary to paint something on the background. So even though the bubbles doesn't look that bad, it's just not perfect. And if you guys stuck it out this long, I just wanted to thank you for checking out one of my videos. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see some more content from me. See ya!